I successfully grew my dad's company to $500 million. But my dad ordered me to get out, saying, "You don't do anything except get a salary for free, so you can go." I smiled and said, "No problem, Dad, you'll be fine." He had no idea I'd already bought the vendor they couldn't live without. When the news hit, Dad shocked, panicked. Cassandra Cassie Mitchell, 34, carefully placed her coffee mug into a small cardboard box, the last item from her office at Mitchell Innovations. Her brothers Timothy and Maxwell stood watching, smirking as she left behind family photos on the wall. Their father Gerald's portrait seemed to follow her with disappointed eyes as security waited by the door. Walking past the champagne bottles her brothers had ready, Cassie smiled slightly. They had no idea what was coming next. Before I continue this story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. If you've ever been underestimated or pushed aside, hit that like button and subscribe to hear how I turned the tables when my own family betrayed me. Growing up as the third child and only daughter in the Mitchell family hadn't been easy. My father, Gerald, started Mitchell Innovations in our garage 30 years ago with nothing but determination and a brilliant mind. I remember watching him work late into the night, tinkering with circuit boards and drafting designs while my brothers Timothy and Maxwell played video games upstairs. From the age of 7, I was fascinated by how things worked. While other girls in my neighborhood played with dolls, I was taking apart old radios and reassembling them. My father noticed my natural aptitude and began teaching me. "Cassie," he'd say, "you've got the Mitchell engineering gene. Your brothers take after your Uncle Frank, more business than innovation." It wasn't meant as an insult to my brothers, just an observation that we had different strengths. The differences became more apparent as we grew older. I excelled in science and mathematics, eventually earning a scholarship to MIT where I graduated with honors in electrical engineering and computer science. Timothy barely scraped through community college with a business administration degree, while Maxwell dropped out altogether after 2 semesters, claiming real business happens outside the classroom. When I returned home with my degree, Dad was already showing early signs of Parkinson's disease. His hands would tremble slightly while working on delicate components, and he tired more easily. The doctors gave him a timeline of 5 to 10 years before the disease would significantly impact his daily functioning. The news devastated our family, but it also forced us to consider the future of Mitchell Innovations. Timothy, being the oldest at 38, naturally assumed he would take over the business aspects of the company. Maxwell, 36, positioned himself as the sales and marketing expert. I was perfectly content leading research and development, where I could continue my father's legacy of innovation. For a while, the arrangement worked. Dad maintained his role as CEO but gradually delegated more responsibilities to us. Under my direction, the R&D department flourished. I developed 3 major technological breakthroughs in power management systems that quickly became our best-selling products. While my brothers handled contracts and marketing, my innovations became the backbone of the company. "Your work has tripled our revenue," Dad told me during one of our late-night lab sessions. His hand shook as he examined my latest prototype, but his eyes were clear and proud. Mitchell Innovations was built on creating solutions nobody else thought of. "You understand that better than anyone, Cassie." Timothy and Maxwell never shared Dad's enthusiasm for my contributions. During board meetings, they'd refer to my department as the expense center rather than acknowledging it as the source of our products. "Anyone could hire engineers to do what you do," Timothy once remarked when I requested an increased R&D budget. My best friend, Abigail Harris, who worked as our legal advisor, warned me about the situation. "Your brothers see you as competition, not as a partner," she said over coffee one Sunday. "You should protect yourself and your work." I dismissed her concerns, believing that family loyalty would prevail over petty jealousy. As Dad's health declined more rapidly than expected over the past 3 years, the power dynamic shifted. Board meetings became tense affairs with Timothy and Maxwell presenting themselves as the true leaders of Mitchell Innovations. They began making decisions without consulting me, expanding our sales team while cutting my R&D budget. The company was growing, but the seeds of conflict were being sown deeper with each passing month. Despite the growing tensions, I remained optimistic about the future of Mitchell Innovations. While my brothers focused on immediate profits, I had been developing a vision that would propel our company to new heights. Clean energy technology was an expanding market with immense potential, and I had identified a gap that no other company had successfully addressed. For 18 months, I worked tirelessly on a new type of solar panel technology that could significantly increase efficiency while decreasing production costs. Traditional solar panels converted only about 20% of sunlight into electricity, but my prototypes were achieving close to 40% in laboratory conditions. If successfully brought to market, this technology could revolutionize the industry and establish Mitchell Innovations as a global leader in renewable energy. My dedication to this project meant many late nights in the lab. I would often arrive before sunrise and leave well after midnight, fueled by black coffee and the excitement of breakthrough moments. The cleaning staff became accustomed to finding me hunched over workbenches or staring intently at computer simulations when they arrived for their early morning shifts. "You're killing yourself for this company," my boyfriend Nathan would say when I canceled our dinner plans for the third time in a week. Despite his complaints, he remained supportive, occasionally bringing takeout to the lab and listening patiently as I explained technical concepts he didn't fully understand. "This is going to change everything," I'd tell him, and he'd nod encouragingly, even if he couldn't grasp the scientific details. My brothers viewed my project with open skepticism. "Solar is oversaturated," Timothy declared during one budget meeting. "The margins are too thin, and the market is dominated by Chinese manufacturers. We should stick to what we know," Maxwell agreed. "Our current product line is profitable. Why risk millions on an unproven concept?" What they failed to understand was that my technology wasn't just another solar panel. It represented a fundamental shift in energy capture and conversion efficiency. To help them see the potential, I arranged a meeting with Rachel Warner, the managing director of Horizon Ventures, a prestigious investment firm specializing in clean technology. Rachel immediately recognized the value of my work. "If your prototypes can deliver even 35% efficiency in real-world conditions, you're looking at potentially disruptive technology," she said, reviewing my technical specifications. "Horizon would be very interested in supporting full-scale development and production." Her enthusiasm reinvigorated my determination. I spent weeks preparing a comprehensive presentation for the board, demonstrating how my solar technology could increase company revenue by up to 300 within 5 years. The market research was solid, the technical achievements were documented, and the potential partnerships were promising. Meanwhile, Dad's condition had deteriorated significantly. The tremors were now constant, and he had difficulties speaking clearly for extended periods. He had stepped back from daily operations entirely, though he still maintained his position as chairman of the board. I desperately wanted to make him proud while he could still appreciate the company's achievements. "The company needs to evolve," he told me during one of his more lucid days. "Innovation is in our name for a reason, Cassie. Don't let Mitchell Innovations become just another manufacturer." His words strengthened my resolve. I formed a strategic partnership with Diana's tech startup, Green Circuit Technologies, to help refine the production process for my solar panels. Diana Lewis had been a classmate at MIT and had developed complementary technology and energy storage solutions. Together, we could offer a complete renewable energy package that would be unmatched in the market. The positive market research continued to pour in. Focus groups responded enthusiastically to prototypes. Industry analysts highlighted the technology in trend reports, and even potential competitors acknowledged the innovative approach. Everything pointed toward a breakthrough moment for Mitchell Innovations, and I couldn't wait to lead the charge into this exciting new territory. The future seemed bright, limited only by my imagination and engineering skill. If only I had recognized the storm clouds gathering behind the scenes. The first hint that something was wrong came when I noticed Timothy and Maxwell having lunch with board members Adrian Phillips and Frederick Chambers at the exclusive Riverside Club. I thought nothing of it initially, assuming it was routine business networking. Later that week, I accidentally discovered an email chain while using Timothy's computer to retrieve budget files during his absence. "Cassandra has become a liability rather than an asset," Timothy had written. "Her expensive projects are diverting resources from our core business. We need to consolidate leadership before she drives the company into uncharted territory." Frederick had replied, "I understand your concerns. A streamlined executive structure would be more efficient. Let's discuss options at Thursday's board meeting." My heart pounded as I scrolled through more messages detailing their plan to remove me from my position. Maxwell had even prepared a presentation on restructuring R&D for maximum efficiency, which was clearly a euphemism for dismantling my department. Still in shock, I confronted Timothy in the company kitchen later that day. "I saw the emails," I said, my voice surprisingly steady despite my inner turmoil. "You're planning to push me out." Timothy didn't even have the decency to look embarrassed. "It's just business, Cassie. The company has outgrown the need for 3 Mitchell siblings at the helm. Maxwell and I agree that your vision doesn't align with our growth strategy." "My innovations are the growth strategy," I countered. "Every major product we sell came from my department." "Anyone could manage the tech side," he dismissed with a wave of his hand. "We've got a dozen engineers who can keep things running. What we need is focused leadership without constant battles over resource allocation." Before I could respond, Maxwell entered, sizing up the situation immediately. "I see Timothy's told you about the reorganization," he said coolly. "Look, you're an excellent engineer, Cassie, but let's be honest, you're just tech support for the real business. We need you in the lab making things, not in the boardroom making decisions." Their casual cruelties stunned me into silence. These were my brothers, the same boys who had played hide and seek with me in our childhood home. now treating me like an inconvenient employee. The formal vote occurred 2 days later. I sat at the boardroom table, watching faces I'd known for years avoid my gaze as Timothy proposed the executive restructuring. The result was 5-2 against me, with only our senior finance director and Dad's old friend voting in my favor. Dad's absence due to a medical appointment seemed suspiciously convenient in retrospect. Effective immediately, Cassandra Mitchell will transition from Executive Director of R&D to Senior Technical Consultant, reporting to the newly created position of Chief Innovation Officer, read the official resolution. A position they had already promised to someone else, I later learned. As I gathered my belongings, I watched through the glass walls as Timothy opened a bottle of champagne in the boardroom. Board members awkwardly accepted glasses, some glancing uncomfortably in my direction. Maxwell raised his glass in a mock toast toward me before taking a deliberate sip. With shaking hands, I called Dad from my car. "They've pushed me out," I explained, trying to keep my voice from breaking. Timothy and Maxwell reorganized the company structure. "What?" His voice was faint and confused. "They can't do that without my approval. They got the board to vote, Dad." "It's done. I'll talk to them," he promised, but we both knew his influence had waned with his health. The company bylaws gave the board authority to make executive changes, and with Dad's diminished capacity, he was chairman in name only. The final betrayal came that evening when Nathan arrived at my apartment. I expected comfort and support, but instead found hesitation in his eyes. "Timothy called me today," he said, shifting uncomfortably on my couch. "They're offering me the VP position in the new innovation department." I stared at him in disbelief. "And you're considering it? It's a major opportunity, Cassie. Double my current salary, stock options, direct report to the executive team. So you'd work for the brothers who just stabbed me in the back?" My voice rose with each word. "It's just business," he echoed Timothy's words. "Besides, maybe this is for the best. You've been killing yourself for that company. Now you can focus on your own projects, maybe start something new." I asked him to leave and not come back. Some betrayals cut too deep for second chances. The next day, security guard Vincent watched impassively as I cleared out my office, decades of my life packed into a single box. He was just doing his job, but the indignity of being escorted from the building my father had built burned like acid. That midnight, Abigail came to my apartment with a bottle of wine and legal pad. "We need to talk about your options," she said, all business despite the late hour. What they did was technically legal, but incredibly short-sighted. "What do you mean?" I asked, still numb from the day's events. "Your patents, Cassie. Who owns the patents to your innovations?" I broke down then, the full weight of betrayal crushing me as I sobbed on my kitchen floor. Abigail sat beside me, her hand on my shoulder, waiting patiently for the storm to pass. Later, as I lay alone in bed, Diana called. "I heard what happened," she said. "Those idiots have no idea what they've lost. But, Cassie, you should know they're already contacting our suppliers, trying to move forward with manufacturing the solar technology without you." The betrayal was complete. My own family had not only pushed me out but were now attempting to steal my life's work. I stared at the ceiling until dawn, grief gradually hardening into resolve. The following Monday, I discovered they had changed the locks to the R&D lab when my keycard was denied access. Lisa from reception looked apologetic as she explained I would need to schedule visits through the new department head. My own lab, where I had spent countless hours bringing innovations to life, was now off limits. That afternoon, I met with patent attorney Stephanie Warren at her downtown office. "I need to verify something," I said, sliding a folder across her desk. "These are all the patent applications I filed while working at Mitchell Innovations." Stephanie reviewed the documents carefully. "These patents are registered to you personally, not to the company," she confirmed. "Did you have an agreement with Mitchell Innovations regarding intellectual property?" "My employment contract stated that any innovations developed on company time would be jointly owned," I explained. "But Dad always insisted I file patents under my own name first with a licensing agreement granted to the company." "Smart man." Stephanie nodded. "And these licensing agreements, what are their terms?" "Non-exclusive, revocable rights to manufacture and sell products based on my patents, contingent upon my continued employment in an executive capacity." Stephanie's eyes widened. "So if you're no longer in an executive position, the licensing agreements are subject to renegotiation or termination." I finished. While I was meeting with Stephanie, my brothers were announcing the company's new direction to the staff. According to texts from sympathetic colleagues, Maxwell had presented my demotion as a mutual decision allowing me to focus on technical work rather than administrative burdens. Timothy had introduced Bernard Wilson, formerly of Comtech Industries, as the new Chief Innovation Officer who would bring fresh perspective to our product development. That night, I began documenting every invention I had created during my time at Mitchell Innovations. Each patent number, each prototype, each product derived from my work. The list grew longer than even I had anticipated, encompassing nearly 80% of the company's current product lineup. Without my innovations, Mitchell Innovations would essentially be a shell company with manufacturing capabilities, but nothing proprietary to produce. Nathan attempted reconciliation with a text message. "Can we talk?" I turned down the position. I didn't respond. Some bridges, once burned, should remain ashes. My documentation process revealed something unexpected. Financial reports I had access to showed that Timothy and Maxwell had been systematically underfunding R&D while overpaying themselves through a complex structure of bonuses and consulting fees to shell companies they controlled. They had been bleeding the company while simultaneously diminishing the department that generated its products. The situation escalated further when industry publication Tech Future published an interview with Maxwell in which he claimed credit for the solar panel technology. "Our team has been developing this breakthrough for years," he stated confidently. "Under my brother Timothy's leadership and my direction of product strategy, Mitchell Innovations is poised to revolutionize renewable energy." The blatant lie sent me into a rage. I threw my tablet across the room, cracking the screen. These were my inventions, my years of work, my intellectual property being claimed by men who couldn't even explain how the technology functioned. That evening, Dad suffered a minor stroke. I rushed to the hospital, arriving before my brothers. Sitting beside his bed, I held his trembling hand as he drifted in and out of consciousness. "They're destroying everything you built," I whispered, unsure if he could hear me. His eyes fluttered open. "I trusted them," he said, his words slurred but understandable. "Mistake." Timothy and Maxwell arrived an hour later, all concerned for the hospital staff but barely acknowledging me. They spoke to Dad as if I weren't present, updating him on business matters that painted everything in the most positive light possible. After leaving the hospital, I found an anonymous text message on my phone. "Drop it and move on. Some fights aren't worth having." The unknown number couldn't be called back, but the threat was clear. Someone wanted me to walk away quietly. Abigail called the next morning with news. "I reviewed the full contract archives," she said. "There's a clause your father inserted into the company bylaws 10 years ago. Any attempt to commercialize patented technology without proper ownership verification requires unanimous board approval. And without that approval, the company assumes all legal liability rather than the individual executives. Your brothers could be putting the entire company at risk if they proceed without resolving the patent situation." I spent several sleepless nights reviewing technical documentation, preparing for what I knew would be an ugly fight. The brothers who had grown up alongside me, who shared my blood and history, had become adversaries willing to steal my life's work. The family dynamics had poisoned the business, and now both were on the verge of implosion. Diana visited on Thursday, bringing takeout and practical advice. "We need to form a strategic response team," she said, laying out containers of Thai food on my dining table. "You, me, Stephanie, and Abigail. They have the company infrastructure, but you have the legal high ground." Meanwhile, Mitchell Innovations was rushing my solar technology to market. Industry newsletters reported that the company had scheduled a major product launch at the upcoming Green Tech Conference, barely 6 weeks away. They were moving with reckless speed, presumably to establish market presence before any legal challenges could derail their plans. "They're making a critical mistake," Stephanie said during our strategy session. "By publicly claiming ownership of your patents while rushing to market, they're creating a clear record of willful infringement." The pieces of my counterattack were falling into place, but the emotional toll was immense. These were not just business adversaries. They were the brothers who had once carried me on their shoulders at family picnics, who had taught me to ride a bike, who had helped me move into my college dorm. Now we were on opposing sides of what promised to be a devastating legal battle. Diana squeezed my hand as she saw tears forming in my eyes. "It's not your fault, Cassie. You tried to be fair. They're the ones who chose this path." I nodded, wiping away tears. "Let's get to work." The Green Tech Conference was the premier industry event for renewable energy innovations attended by manufacturers, investors, and media from around the world. I watched the live stream from Diana's office, my stomach nodding as Timothy took the stage for Mitchell Innovations' keynote presentation. "Today marks a new chapter in sustainable energy," he announced to the packed auditorium. "After years of dedicated research, Mitchell Innovations is proud to introduce SolarMax, revolutionary solar capture technology that achieves efficiency levels previously thought impossible." Maxwell joined him on stage as they unveiled my prototype, now housed in sleek casing with the Mitchell Innovations logo prominently displayed. SolarMax panels convert up to 38% of solar energy into electricity, nearly double the industry standard, he explained, using the exact figures from my research. The audience erupted in applause. Timothy beamed, soaking in the adulation for work he had not done and could not have done. The company's stock jumped 27% by mid-afternoon as news of the breakthrough spread through financial markets. "They're digging their own grave," said Margaret Reynolds, the top patent lawyer we had retained. Every public statement, every press release, every product specification they publish creates another piece of evidence for our case. We had been preparing our legal response for weeks. Margaret's team had assembled comprehensive documentation proving my ownership of the patents, including the original application paperwork, laboratory notebooks, prototype development records, and witness statements from engineers who had worked under my direction. The cease and desist letters are ready, Margaret confirmed. We can deliver them whenever you give the word. I hesitated, still hoping for some last-minute resolution that wouldn't destroy the company my father had built. Let me try one more thing, I said. That evening, I visited Dad in the hospital. His condition had stabilized, and he was having one of his more lucid days. I explained the situation in detail, showing him the patent documentation and the brothers' public claims. I never thought it would come to this, he said, his voice weak but clear. I tried to create something that would unite the family, not tear it apart. What did you intend, Dad? For the company leadership. He reached for my hand. You were always meant to lead innovation. That was never in question. The arrangement was supposed to be temporary until you had enough experience to take over completely. They never told me that. Because I never told them, he admitted. I thought they would recognize your value without me forcing the issue. I was wrong. His nurse entered to check his vitals, ending our conversation. But his words had strengthened my resolve. The next morning, I authorized Margaret to proceed with the cease and desist letters. Timothy called within an hour of receiving the legal notice, his voice vibrating with rage. What the hell is this, Cassie? Some kind of shakedown? It's a formal notification that Mitchell Innovations is infringing on my patents, I replied calmly. You're manufacturing and selling products based on intellectual property you don't own and don't have a license to use. This is our family company. You can't sue your own family. You didn't consider me family when you voted me out, Timothy. Why should I consider you family now? He switched tactics, his voice suddenly conciliatory. Look, maybe we moved too quickly. We can discuss bringing you back in some capacity. As what? Senior technical consultant. The time for negotiation was before you stole my work. After Timothy's call, Maxwell gave an interview to Business Insider, dismissing the patent issue as a disgruntled former executive making baseless claims. He assured investors that Mitchell Innovations had rock-solid ownership of all its technologies. Rachel's investment firm issued a statement expressing concern about the ownership dispute and announcing they were pausing their planned investment pending resolution. Other potential partners began distancing themselves as news of the legal challenge spread. Diana offered a potential lifeline. If things go nuclear with Mitchell Innovations, my company would be interested in a merger. We could create something new, something better. I appreciated her support but wasn't ready to abandon hope for the company my father had created. Let's see how the board responds first, I said. The situation reached its crisis point when I attempted to deliver additional documentation to the board members personally. Security stopped me in the lobby of Mitchell Innovations headquarters. I'm sorry, Ms. Mitchell, said the guard, a new hire who didn't know me. You're on the restricted access list. I need to speak with the board members, I insisted. It's regarding the patent situation. I have orders not to allow you into the building under any circumstances. As we argued, Frederick Chambers, one of the board members, entered the lobby. Seeing the commotion, he approached cautiously. Frederick, I called out. The board needs to understand what's happening. Timothy and Maxwell are putting the entire company at risk. Frederick glanced nervously toward the elevators. I can't get involved, Cassandra. This is between you and your brothers now. The board will be liable, I warned. You've been notified of the patent infringement. If you proceed, it's willful infringement and the damages will be astronomical. He hesitated, then handed me his business card. Send whatever documentation you have to my personal email. I can't promise anything, but I'll review it. It wasn't much, but it was the first crack in the wall my brothers had built around the company. As I left the building, I saw Timothy watching from an upper-floor window, his expression unreadable from that distance. The final confrontation was inevitable now. 3 days after the confrontation at headquarters, Margaret's legal team delivered a comprehensive cease and desist package to each board member via certified mail. The documentation included not only the patent ownership records, but also a detailed financial analysis showing that 83% of Mitchell Innovations' revenue came from products based on my intellectual property. We've included a preliminary damages calculation, Margaret explained. With willful infringement penalties, they're looking at potential liability exceeding $300 million. The board called an emergency meeting without informing Timothy or Maxwell. Abigail, who maintained connections within the company, texted me updates throughout the session. They're reviewing the patent documentation now, she wrote. Frederick is arguing that the company needs to take this seriously. An hour later, Adrienne is questioning how this was allowed to happen, asking why legal department didn't flag the patent ownership issue. And finally, board has requested your presence to discuss resolution options. Timothy and Maxwell being called in separately. I arrived at the company's legal counsel's office to find most of the board already assembled. Frederick nodded slightly as I entered, while Adrian Phillips looked distinctly uncomfortable. The company's attorneys sat reviewing documents with concerned expressions. "Miss Mitchell," began Helen Rodriguez, the board's senior member, "we've reviewed your documentation regarding the patent ownership situation. Can you explain why this wasn't addressed during your tenure as Executive Director of R&D? "It was addressed," I replied, opening my laptop. "I have copies of quarterly reports where I explicitly noted that the company operated under licensing agreements for my patents. These reports were distributed to all board members and executives." I displayed the relevant documents on the conference room screen. As you can see, the licensing terms were clearly stated, including the clause regarding termination upon my removal from an executive position. The attorneys exchanged glances. One leaned over to whisper something to Helen, who frowned deeply. The door burst open as Timothy entered, his face flushed with anger. "What is she doing here? This meeting wasn't on my calendar." "Sit down, Timothy," Helen ordered. "We're discussing the patent situation that threatens to bankrupt this company." Maxwell arrived moments later, looking more composed but equally surprised to see me. As the situation was explained to them, Timothy's expression morphed from anger to disbelief. "This is absurd," he sputtered. "She developed those technologies as an employee of Mitchell Innovations. They belong to the company." The lead attorney shook his head. "The employment contract and licensing agreements are clear. The patents belong to Cassandra personally with conditional licensing granted to the company. When you removed her from her executive position, you triggered the termination clause of those licensing agreements." Maxwell attempted a different approach. "Many of these innovations were joint developments. I personally contributed to the conceptual framework of several key products." I couldn't help but laugh. "Please, explain the operating principles of the phase shift power regulator you supposedly helped develop." He opened and closed his mouth, unable to articulate even basic details about the technology. Adrian, who had voted for my removal, now looked thoroughly alarmed. "What are our options here? Can we negotiate new licensing terms?" "That would be up to Miss Mitchell," the attorney replied. "As it stands, the company has no legal right to manufacture, sell, or profit from any product using her patented technologies." The atmosphere in the room shifted as the full implications became clear. Without my patents, Mitchell Innovations would lose most of its product line overnight. The stock would collapse, contracts would be breached, and the company my father had built would likely not survive. The unexpected happened next. The conference room door opened, and Dad was wheeled in by his nurse. Despite his frail appearance, his eyes were clear and determined. "Dad." Timothy stood. "You shouldn't be here. You need to rest." "I need to fix what's broken," Dad replied, his voice weak but resolute. "I built this company for all of you, not for you to destroy each other." He gestured for the nurse to position his wheelchair at the head of the table. "I may be chairman in name only these days, but I still own controlling interest in Mitchell Innovations. The board serves at my pleasure, and my children are still my children, regardless of their mistakes." He turned to Timothy and Maxwell. "You betrayed your sister and nearly destroyed this company in the process. Did you really think she wouldn't protect her work?" Timothy started to speak, but Dad raised a trembling hand to silence him. "I've reviewed everything. The patents, the licensing agreements, the board minutes from when you orchestrated Cassie's removal. You've put the entire company at risk through your short-sightedness and greed." "We were trying to streamline leadership," Maxwell argued weakly. "You're trying to take control," Dad corrected. "And in doing so, you failed to understand the most basic fact about this company. Its value lies in its innovations, not in its management structure." He turned to me, his expression softening. "And you, Cassie, you have every legal right to reclaim your patents and walk away. But that would end Mitchell Innovations, hurting hundreds of employees who had nothing to do with this mess." The room fell silent as everyone awaited my response. The power had shifted completely. From being escorted out by security just weeks earlier, I now held the company's fate in my hands. "I don't want to destroy the company," I said finally. "I never did, but I won't be marginalized or have my contributions stolen." Dad nodded. "Then let's fix this as a family and as a company." Over the next 4 hours, with attorneys present, we negotiated a comprehensive restructuring of Mitchell Innovations. I would be reinstated as Executive Vice President and Chief Technology Officer with direct report to the CEO, a position that would be filled by an outside candidate approved by all 3 Mitchell siblings. Timothy and Maxwell would remain on the executive team, but with reduced authority and new accountability measures. Most importantly, my patents would remain my property, with new licensing agreements that cannot be terminated without my consent and that included significant royalty provisions. The board would be reconstituted with new independent members to prevent future power plays. As word spread throughout the company, reactions were mixed. Many employees seemed relieved that the leadership crisis was being resolved, while others loyal to my brothers were visibly displeased. Bernard Wilson, the recently hired Chief Innovation Officer, tendered his resignation immediately. Dodd insisted on making the announcement himself, gathered in the company's main atrium, supported by his nurse. Mitchell Innovations has always been about family and innovation, he told the assembled staff. Today, we recommit to those principles with a leadership structure that honors both. As we worked through the transition, Nathan attempted to reinsert himself into my life, claiming he had always supported me behind the scenes. I declined his calls, having learned which relationships could withstand pressure and which would crumble. Frederick approached me after one particularly long planning session. "I was wrong about you," he admitted. "I voted for your removal because I believed your brother's assertions that you were difficult and uncooperative. I should have looked deeper." "We all make mistakes in judgment," I replied. "It's what we do afterward that matters." Diana's proposed partnership moved forward, strengthening both our positions in the renewable energy market. The solar panel technology would be the first joint venture, with others planned for the future. The transition wasn't smooth. Timothy and Maxwell alternated between resentful compliance and grudging cooperation. But with Dad's oversight and the board's new composition, the company began to stabilize. The crisis had been painful but necessary, forcing a reckoning that had been years in the making. As we prepared for a proper launch of the solar technology, now with full acknowledgement of my role as inventor and patent holder, Rachel returned with her investment proposal. "We're satisfied that the ownership issues have been resolved," she said. "Horizon Ventures is prepared to move forward with funding the manufacturing expansion." It was a vindication and a new beginning, both for me and for Mitchell Innovations. 6 months after the dramatic restructuring, Mitchell Innovations had not only survived but was thriving under the new leadership model. As Executive Vice President and CTO, I had implemented changes that transformed our approach to innovation and recognition. The most significant change was the employee equity program I established, which ensured that engineers and designers who contributed to successful products received both recognition and financial rewards for their innovations. "No one should have their work claimed by others," I explained at the program's launch. Mitchell Innovations values creators at every level. Timothy and Maxwell had adjusted to their new roles with varying degrees of acceptance. Timothy, as VP of Operations, had surprisingly excelled once freed from the pressures of top leadership. He had always been meticulous and process-oriented, skills that served the company well in this capacity. Maxwell struggled more with the transition. His title of VP of Sales remained, but with oversight mechanisms that prevented the financial mismanagement of the past. In time, he seemed to make peace with the new reality, occasionally even acknowledging the value of our more balanced leadership approach. Nathan's career had suffered unexpected consequences after his betrayal. Word had spread through industry channels about his willingness to benefit from the ousting of the very person who had championed his early career. Job offers that had been on the table mysteriously disappeared, and his professional reputation took a hit from which it would take years to recover. Frederick and I developed a surprisingly positive working relationship based on mutual respect. "You showed remarkable restraint," he told me during a strategy meeting. "You could have destroyed the company out of vengeance, but you chose reconstruction instead." Abigail officially joined Mitchell Innovations as Chief Legal Officer, bringing her sharp mind and ethical approach to all company dealings. "Never again will this company be vulnerable to internal power struggles," she declared as she implemented new governance procedures. The partnership with Diana's Green Circuit Technologies exceeded our expectations. Our combined technologies created renewable energy solutions that quickly captured market share from established competitors. "This is what happens when innovation is valued over ego," Diana remarked at our first joint product launch. Dad's health stabilized enough for him to serve in a part-time advisory role. Though his Parkinson's continued to progress, his mind remained sharp, and his presence provided valuable continuity and wisdom during the transition. "I'm more proud of how you handled this crisis than of anything else I've seen in my life," he told me during a quiet moment in his office. Industry recognition followed our successful restructuring. The Women in Technology Association presented me with their annual Leadership Award, citing not only my technical innovations, but also the cultural changes I had implemented at Mitchell Innovations. "True innovation requires diverse perspectives and proper attribution," I said in my acceptance speech. "No one creates in isolation, and no one should claim credit for others' work." Inspired by my own experience, I established an innovation incubator within the company providing resources and mentorship to young engineers with promising ideas. "Your value isn't determined by your title or your family name," I told the first cohort. "It's determined by your contributions and your integrity." As time passed, I reflected often on the painful lessons I had learned through the ordeal. Family dynamics can poison business relationships if not carefully managed. Loyalty must be earned rather than assumed. Documentation and legal protection of intellectual property isn't a stress, it's prudence. And, most importantly, standing up for yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary. Rachel's investment firm increased their stake in Mitchell Innovations, impressed by our strong financial performance and ethical governance. "You've created something rare," she told me, "a technology company that values both innovation and innovators." The balance between business success and personal relationships remained challenging. Timothy and Maxwell were still my brothers despite everything that had happened. At company functions, we maintained professional courtesy, but family dinners were awkward affairs with conversation carefully steered away from business matters. Our father remained the bridge between us, his illness providing perspective that business disputes couldn't overshadow. "Life is too short for permanent grudges," he reminded us. "Find a way forward, even if it can never be the same." New patent filings reflected our company's renewed focus on groundbreaking technologies. The solar innovations were just the beginning, with energy storage, distribution, and conservation solutions following in rapid succession. Mitchell Innovations reclaimed its reputation as an industry pioneer rather than just another manufacturer. 6 months after the restructuring, we held a family dinner at Dad's house. The conversation was stilted at first, with Timothy and Maxwell clearly uncomfortable. But as the evening progressed, old family stories emerged, and moments of genuine laughter broke through the tension. "Remember when Cassie took apart the microwave because she wanted to see how it worked?" Maxwell recalled, smiling despite himself. "Mom was furious," Timothy added. "But Dad just asked if she'd learned anything useful." "I did, actually," I said. "That was when I first understood how electromagnetic radiation could be controlled and directed. It influenced my work on the targeted energy transfer systems years later." Dad looked around the table at his 3 children, his eyes tired but content. "This is what I wanted to build. Not just a company, but a legacy that would keep you connected to each other." As the quarterly results were announced the following week, showing record-breaking performance across all divisions, I sat in what had once been my father's office, now mine. The patent certificates hung on the wall, properly credited and protected. The desk where I had placed my single cardboard box of belongings months earlier now held the tools and plans for the company's future. The experience had transformed me from a brilliant engineer who avoided conflict into a leader who understood that sometimes conflict is necessary to protect what matters. My technical skills had built Mitchell Innovations products, but my willingness to stand firm had saved its soul. I still believed in family, in loyalty, and in shared purpose. But I now knew that these values must be coupled with clear boundaries, proper recognition, and equitable treatment. The patents that had given me leverage in our family's power struggle now served as reminders that value must be acknowledged, not exploited. Mitchell Innovations continued to grow and evolve, stronger for having weathered the crisis that might have destroyed it. And I continued to create and innovate, now with the confidence that my contributions would be recognized and respected, not despite my family connections, but because of the values our family company truly represented. Have you ever had to stand up for yourself when others try to take credit for your work or ideas? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video if you've ever been underestimated, and subscribe to hear more stories about overcoming betrayal and finding your strength. Share this with someone who needs a reminder that they deserve recognition for their contributions. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, sometimes the most painful lessons lead to the most powerful transformations.